Welcome to Modus Cafe. Join us for fun, lighthearted, and educational conversations around training, athletic longevity, and the human side of climbing, with your hosts, Mercedes Pollmeyer and Katja Dev. Okay, here we go. Another podcast. So today, we're going to be talking about the 5 simple ways to improve your training session. And we've chosen some very simple yet effective things. So these are things that you could do in your next training session to feel so much better in your training session. So let's start with number 1. Katja, hello. Are you ready to talk about...
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
I'm here too.
Yeah. Do you want to fire off the first tactic?
Number 1, what do I want to start with? Maybe because I'm feeling a little bit hungry myself right now. I'm gonna start with the SNACKS.
Snacks.
Yeah. Well, I don't love necessarily the word snacks or snacks per se. I mean, I'm not against snacks, but I'm for good nutrition, as most of you probably know. So I think the first thing I would like to share with everybody, which seems so simple, but most people don't do it, is to just fuel really well around workouts. And that could look like bringing a snack to the gym and having a snack mid-workout. It's often best to eat a snack before you get really hungry, because that means at that point your body's already really deprived of nutrients, and it'll be really hard for your body and muscles to fire well without being really well fueled. And in fact, actually, your brain needs fuel before your body. But the problem is, if your brain is not well fueled, your brain will not signal to your body to go hard. So we need to make sure we keep that blood sugar up. And so that can look like eating and bringing snacks to the gym, but also, and maybe more importantly, really thinking about your fueling before you go to the gym. Now, everybody is different, but a lot of people do go after work. They go in the evening, and often people might not eat all that well after lunch. So I would really encourage people to consider a solid snack about an hour-ish before working out, or definitely bringing a snack and maybe having the snack after warming up or earlier in the session, depending on when you ate last. And honestly, just fueling a little bit more makes so many people feel better and be able to go harder. And that also includes eating in the morning if you go before work. There might be some people out there who don't love eating breakfast. And I'm not one of these coaches who tells people to do what they don't want to do. Everybody should listen to their own bodies. I really believe in that. But I encourage everybody to play around with fueling a little bit, because even if you're not used to eating breakfast and it sounds really terrible, I would encourage you to just try to just have a smoothie in the morning before working out. Most people feel amazing working out after having eaten something. It can make such a huge difference. So,
can you tell us maybe some signs during or after your workout that maybe you should consider fueling during your workout or before your workout?
I don't know exactly. If this is a leading question, you have to give me a stronger pointer, but I can tell you some things like fueling around workouts and why it's really important to not be totally nutrient deprived. One is that I mentioned before, is just your blood sugar. So simply just, the amount of sugar that's circulating in your blood. And when I say sugar, I mean, glucose, which is really the molecule that our body uses. Glucose is actually the main fuel that our brain uses. So actually just making sure that our brain is functioning well. I know we're working on our body, but that our brain is functioning well is so important. I mean, especially for climbing when we do really complex and difficult movement, but also for our brains to signal our bodies to go really hard. Because when our brain signals starvation, our brain is not going to tell our body to do hard stuff because our brain is preparing for the future. And starvation signals, I'm not going to have enough, fuel to build this muscle, so we might as well not try very hard. So even just from that simple perspective, it's really important to regulate your blood sugar, like meaning make sure you have enough sugar in your blood, meaning glucose that comes from, carbohydrates. And also actually protein is really important. Maybe that's what you were getting at. Protein is really important, obviously, because that's how we repair and grow our muscles after a workout. But protein is actually also really important for stabilizing the blood sugar that I just talked about. So making sure that it's not called a protein pool, but it's called the amino acid pool in your body, in your blood is really also full, is really important because it allows for your muscles to grow and you don't want to dip into that. It's going to be counterproductive for your muscle growth, essentially. So actually eating protein before your workout is just as important because these amino acids actually stick around. So when you eat protein before your workout, they will still be around after your workout because we can store them for a couple of hours. But then obviously eating after your workout is really important too, like to continually, replenish this amino acid pool. But actually turns out, and most people don't know this, I've written about this before, but actually the day after working out is one is also super crucial to make sure that your protein intake is really up to par because muscle synthesis, so muscle growth is really upregulated for about 24 hours. 24 hours after working out is when we think it's the highest. So yeah, having that post-workout protein snack is really important because muscle growth is upregulated right away, but really making sure to continuing to fuel well. And actually also eating carbohydrates while working out is also important to offset muscle breakdown because eating carbohydrates has like a protective effect for muscle breakdown because if we don't have enough carbohydrates in our body and fat is not easily available, our body will also start breaking down or at least offset muscle growth in order to make sure we're fueling our body first. Because the way our body works is, obviously we want to survive before we grow muscle and climb well, So we have to make sure those needs are met. So actually eating enough carbohydrates and protein before, during, and after workout is really important. Fats are obviously really important too. I don't talk about them very much, but I do love talking about them. I'm actually writing a post about them for a community this week. They're really important too. They're just not directly important for working out. They're just fats are just important for being a healthy human being.
Okay. Awesome.
That might have been a long-winded answer, but I get going.
Yeah.
We should do nutrition. We should talk about nutrition. Yeah. In a podcast.
Totally.
And I can dive into it a little bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah. With that, I do want to add that hydration is really important too. It's still the same point. We're still at point number one. Nutrition and hydration. Hydration is really important. When we say hydration, water is really important, but what's also super important is electrolytes. And you can consume electrolytes with food for sure. And again, this is where I encourage people to perhaps play around with this because especially people who eat a very clean, healthy, whole foods-based diet can be low in electrolytes. And that is really important for our muscles to function well. And also hydration is really important for tendon health as well. So we're not getting injured. So stay hydrated. Make sure you drink well before and during your workout. And of course, afterwards too. Okay, that was my point number one.
Point number one. Okay. Snacks and hydration. So I'm going to talk about the warm-up. So this would be point number two. So warming up, I think everybody understands that, you probably should warm up, but why? And really like it comes down to like what I really enjoy about the warm up is that it's a really good time to start checking in with your body. The warm up is going to tell you a lot about where your body is that day and maybe how hard you can push that day. Because as we know with like training programs, like, oh, today's Wednesday, I am supposed to do this limit bouldering session. But you know what? I only slept 4 hours last night and I didn't get enough snacks. And I feel a little dehydrated. Okay, so I'm actually not feeling great in my warm up. How can I shift my session based on how I feel? So this is a really good time to check in with your physical state, your emotional state. And then there's the actual part of warming up. And warming up, obviously, like we all know, like you should warm up to make sure you've got enough blood flow in your muscles, your joints, your tendons, you know, like all of that good stuff. And actually, the more you can ramp up your warm up, like kind of slowly over maybe like a 5 to 10 minute period, the better it is. So like we definitely, you know, all of our athletes, we have basically a very standard warm up that we like everyone to do and they get really good at, and then they just like memorize this warm up. And it focuses on all joints of the body. And depending on you as a person, maybe you have a very tight part of your body that needs to get opened up. This is a good time to focus on that. So yeah, ramp up your warm up, but don't do it for too long either. There is such a thing as warming up for too long. You know, like actually a lot of my youth athletes tend to warm up for a very long period of time, and which is okay. I'd rather people warm up longer than they should. But just understand that the longer your warm up, the more energy you're taking away from your main session. And so you kind of need to find that right warm up length, or depending on your session, you know, you're going to warm up a little different in a strength training session versus a hangboard session versus like a limit session. So you're going to have to like really dial that in. But, you know, I generally like a warm up that's anywhere between 10 to 20 minutes. And that gives me enough time to get everything ready before my main session.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Yeah. Warming up so important. I could use some of that right now. It's freezing. Yeah. Freezing where I'm at. But yeah, actually, some of my favorite warm-up routines are actually the wrist warm-up routine, which I think a lot of people don't necessarily do, but it's been really good for my wrists to warm them up. And it's really short once you have especially memorized it. And also my shoulders. I really love warming up my shoulders. It makes a huge difference. What are your favorite warm-up routines? Or like, what are your favorite parts? Because those are not the only two things I do.
Yes.
So what are your favorite parts?
You know, actually, I love the Spider-Man press. That is probably the one exercise that I have had since I started training for climbing. So I've done that almost every single session. Love that exercise. And that wrist warm-up, man. You know, I got the wrist warm-up from actually a handstand practice and realized that this is probably very effective for climbers. And since integrating the wrist warm-up, I've had less issues with my wrists and my hands and my fingers just generally. And it also helps your elbows as well. Yeah. And with the warm-up, actually, there's one, so the third part of this, the simple ways to increase, you know, your training session or improve your training session is breathing. And so you can do this as part of your warm-up, and you can do this at the beginning of your warm-up or right after your warm-up. But I really like having folks spend a few minutes just sitting either in child's pose or on their back and set a timer for 2 to 5 minutes. And you're just taking some nice deep breaths and you're listening to your breath. Maybe you think about things, you note it, you come back to your breath. You could call this meditation if you want to, but really the reason why this is so effective is because it regulates your nervous system. And what we know about stress in general, like there's different types of stress. And when we work out, we call this eustress. It's a good type of stress. But if you're coming into the session feeling stressed from your day, maybe you just ran into traffic that flipped someone off in traffic and you're like, okay, now you're coming into the gym angry. Your nervous system is elevated, and you're tapping into more of your sympathetic nervous system. And when you're already starting the session like that, you're using so much more energy than you need to. And so we actually want to switch your nervous system from sympathetic into parasympathetic nervous system, which is where you feel a little bit more relaxed. Maybe you let some of your stress from your day go before you even start training. And some of our clients actually in our membership have said that they've been doing the breathing every session, that now when they start their workout, they're actually feeling more relaxed just automatically, even before they even start the breathing exercise, which is so cool. Oh my gosh. So you can get a lot of benefit from that. And I would say the second benefit of this breathing is you actually start your recovery process by breathing at the beginning of your session.
Yeah, I love it. Our breath is so simple and so important.
Yeah.
I just briefly want to come back to being relaxed, when training. Obviously, it's important for all the things that you've said, but I think it's especially important for climbing. Because I know you said training is eustress, so it's positive stress, but it's interesting for climbing because, for one, it's such a complex activity, that we have to do. So being relaxed can really help us focus on the climb. We need to really be able to orchestrate really complicated movements, but also being relaxed can help us not over gripping and therefore actually climbing better. And being relaxed can also really help us with fear management, which we're not going to get into today. But, for a lot of people, climbing brings out some fears or some nervousness. It doesn't always have to be a deep-seated fear, but climbing itself can be stressful, And so when we're already not relaxed, when we're already, using less of our brain capacity, because we're so busy subconsciously still being stressed, it's going to impact our performance, And climbing training, half of climbing training or more than that, probably 75% of it is on the wall. So I think it's so helpful. I think probably for strength training in general, but specifically for climbing too, to get into that relaxed and focused state. And I don't know about people listening, I don't know if you've ever thought about it, but I certainly definitely notice a difference in my climbing when I'm more relaxed and less stressed. And another little trick, if people want to try this, is actually, and this is specific to climbing. I mean, you can do this in other ways too, but it's easy to do while you climb, is actually to smile. It actually turns out when we smile, it relaxes us. So smiling and also using our eyes and looking into the distance can also have a similar effect. This works particularly well for people who climb on ropes. For bouldering, it doesn't work as well, just by the nature of bouldering. Really, a few moves that are really hard, it doesn't work as well to look somewhere else. But for sport climbing, you often have those moments where you shake out and you chalk up, where you could just kind of stare into the distance, and it actually signals our body that we're safe, and that can relax us and remind us that we're safe, just looking into the far distance. Also something we can talk about later when we talk more about strategies and tactics for sport climbing. So wanted to add that because you said that, but being relaxed is quite important. And the breathing exercises that we do are just 2 minutes. There are 2 minutes that are well invested.
Yeah. And that was a really cool little even tactic that you slid in there with the smiling. That's awesome.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. So we talked about snacks. We talked about warming up. We talked about breathing. So we have 2 more points that you can start working on right now. And Katya, do you want to talk about, this is maybe the most important one.
Yeah, why don't we leave that? I think it's the most important one, but it's also the one I suggested. So.
Yes.
Why don't we leave that for the end? Why don't you do? Because I think I think the next one might fit in.
Got it. Yeah. Better. Okay. All right. So I'm up. All right. So number 4, and this one is resting enough between your attempts. So obviously it depends on the type of session that you're doing, but for most people, especially maybe like if you're not on a training program and you're not trying to work on energy systems, if you're just getting to the gym and you're like really stoked on climbs and you're just trying these really focus on giving every attempt the best quality attempt and then resting really, really well. And when I say resting, you could be shaking out, you could be breathing. This is a really good time to implement more breathing. Try not to look at your phone, try not to. And when you're resting, you can also be looking at your climb and figuring out, okay, I'm visualizing the movement. I'm maybe mimicking the movement, moving your arms around, shifting your hips around on the ground as you're looking at the climb. And by giving yourself enough rest and kind of doing these like little mini tactics as you're resting, the next attempt is going to be high quality again, because you've just allowed your body to recover from that last attempt that you just did. And I don't think that people really understand that rest is like the amount of rest is so crucial. Like 1 minute is not enough. Like really, when we do really quality, hard attempts, it's probably going to take you at least 5 minutes to recover from that. And there is a lot of research on this, maybe not in climbing, but from really hard efforts, we know that it takes a long time to really recover from something like that. So give yourself that time. We may think that doing climbs back to back without any rest, like, oh, it feels really hard and oh, I'm getting pumped, but actually long term, this isn't going to be good for you. You're not learning anything. And it takes away from every attempt that you have in the future. So give yourself some more rest time. For our students, we suggest 3 to 5 minutes minimum. Try to get 3 to 5 minutes of rest. If it's a longer climb, you might be resting 10 to 20 minutes between attempts.
Yeah. What are some of your favorite strategies for resting that you use?
I always set a timer, always, because I am impatient. I'm like, oh, is it time yet? I'm like, no, actually, I still have 2 more minutes. Great. And then I'll sit there, visualize a little bit more, chalk up and do my breathing. So the timer really does help. Yes, you're looking at your phone, but I actually use my watch timer. I like to wear my watch when I'm climbing.
And what about stretching while you rest in between?
Oh, yeah. Yes, this is a really cool strategy, that especially if you're resting for longer periods of time, you're stretching. So I wouldn't stretch your fingers or your hands between attempts, but you could stretch your hips or your back, or your calves. And the benefit of stretching is that, one, it does increase that parasympathetic nervous system. So you tapping into that again. So you're feeling relaxed, which is good. Actually, I think a lot of people think that, oh, I shouldn't be relaxed before I try really hard. No, you are going to be able to bring it just as hard if you are relaxing really well. Yeah. And it really does just help that recovery again. And in some of the powerlifting literature, they do research on breathing and relaxation methods between lifts, and they see that the more you can bring your heart rate down, like the faster you can bring your heart rate down and the faster you can get into a relaxed state, the better your performance is long term, and the faster your recovery for that next day of climbing, or for them it was the next day of lifting. So yeah, there's a lot that you can get just from resting and breathing between attempts.
Totally. It's also a great time to grab some water.
Yeah.
Make sure you're drinking water and maybe a snack.
Maybe a snack. Yeah.
Chat to a friend. I see people bring books to the gym.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah. I often bring my son to the gym, so I spend time with my son. That's one way of making sure you taking enough time. I will admit it's also hard for me. I'm just always so excited, especially when I try hard things like projects. I'm so excited. I want to go, but especially when I try hard projects, I should be resting more. And actually, one of the strategies that I love to do, especially outside, is go on a little walk. And it keeps me warm, especially outside. Sometimes we climb when it's not very warm outside. So it keeps me warm, but it also keeps my circulation going to make sure, all the metabolites are like being exchanged. And, I'm getting ready. So I kind of like that. And the walk also helps with my breathing, actually. So I kind of just walk around the woods a little bit. It tends to be very relaxing for me. And especially before I do red point attempts, I go and walk quite a bit, because I've been known to rest up to an hour before sending. So when I go out for red pointing, and this is a boulder problem that I'm talking about, it's not even a route. Of course, I rest longer before I attempt routes, but yeah, it's definitely one of the things I've learned kind of late in my climbing journey. I feel like how important resting is.
We should talk about outdoor resting tactics. I think we could make a whole episode just on that.
Yeah, because it's different, it changes the game a little bit. I think in some ways it's easier, in some ways it's harder, but yeah.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. And I think the point that you brought up about the stretching, if you're doing outdoor attempts, I think the stretching can actually be very beneficial during your rest times.
So why would it be more beneficial outside versus inside?
One, because you don't feel rushed. I think when you're in the gym, like people might only have 60 to 90 minutes to get their workout done. And when you're stretching in between, I think we often rush the stretching, or maybe it just like makes you a little anxious because you're like, oh, I'm like wasting my time or something like that, between attempts. And when you're outside though, like you probably have a little area allocated for all of your stuff, and you could have your little stretchy mat there, and you could just sit and, give yourself a little bit more space and time to sit in those stretches a little longer, to actually get some benefit out of it as well. And it does force you to slow down, which is nice. Yeah,
nice. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, you too. Okay.
Last point.
Up. Yes.
The most important one, in my opinion.
Yep.
is to have fun.
That's right.
I know it sounds so simple. And I always have to remind people, and people roll their eyes, but I think actually it's interesting. We train a lot of adults, and we kind of forget to have fun sometimes. And a lot of climbers are very serious. They really get into the projects. They really get into their training. They really get into their heads. And we forget to have fun. Training and climbing ends up just being another chore on our list of things to do. And guess what? We tend to not do things well that we don't want to do, that we don't enjoy doing. So having fun is quite important. And having fun is something that we can learn / remind ourselves of, because I do think it's something that we kind of forget a little bit. We get into performance mode, or into, I need to get this workout done today, kind of like feeling that stress a little bit that you talked about. And actually that breathing can really help resetting yourself and putting yourself into that fun mode. and to then also perform well. When I say perform well, I mean like train well or do your exercises well. It's also a life, when we decide to train, most of us are not, pro athletes. We train and this is part of our life, so I think having fun is just really important for that too. And it really, really helps with consistency. Like, how difficult is it to go and do something that you enjoy doing? That's not as difficult versus something that you really don't enjoy doing. And I really want to remind people that, having fun is something you can try to practice. You can try to be more intentional about. And this can look like, wearing a really favorite outfit, or sometimes I put on special earrings before I go to the gym, or I love listening to podcasts or my own music when I go to the gym. It could mean meeting up with special people. If, they have the same intentions as you in terms of training. It could also mean maybe treating yourself to that snack that you normally don't treat yourself to. Actually, training could be a perfect time to have that special treat, either before training or during training even. I actually like to recommend having like a special treat during training, just because then you've already started to, or at least making it to the gym before you have your treat, instead of having it at home before you go and then you might still not go. But having it maybe after you warm up. Maybe you warm up and you reset yourself and then you have that treat if you want to have a treat. Yeah, making a playlist, doing whatever is fun for you. It's really important because I think training especially can turn into a grind a little bit if you're doing the same things every week. So yeah, I think it's been really important for me, for sure. And it works really well. And when you smile and you're more relaxed, you also just do your thing better. So it's kind of, like a cycle. So that's my last tip for the world.
Amazing. All right. So as a summary, so we've got our 5 simple ways to improve your training session. So we've got snacks and hydration. Do a good warm-up. Try some breathing. Rest a little bit longer. Make those rests effective. And have fun.
Yes.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, Katja. And thank you, everybody, for listening. And as always, we'll see you soon.
Sounds good.
Bye.
Bye.